websites, and I get things like, for instance, my sons are applying to a private school just because I could move, this remote learning was bad, whatever. And when you do that, they hook you. You can't get out of it. Then I get bombarded with all these private school from like like it just like, that's what it is. Once you get on the website, sometimes you can't even get on the website without putting your email in, right? They want that contact, right? You can't even, I don't know if you guys want to be that strict, but sometimes you can do that. You're probably not going to do that on this site, but that's how they get your email, and then they give you multiple ways to opt out, and you have. And I kind of resent the fact, like, well, why are you opting out? Well, what's your reasoning? Like, I hate that. I realize I'd just rather have like, please tell us why. It's like doing a free survey. Like, I don't want to do that, but I think it's right to opt out of the different choices. And I would kind of side with you, Kelly. I'd probably want to tweak it as you get along. If, I don't know what that means for them, but if there's more work, but you can easily think of the top 6 or 8, right? It's easy. It's like,
right. And I think that's, I think we're like,
yeah.
Literally Greg just thought of like 3 more. So I was like, well, this is kind of my point, that we want to be able to customize. We don't want to be
locked. Once it gets over 10, it's like no one's gonna look at it. Your eyes are gonna just blur. They're gonna say, get delete all. They're not gonna even want to read.
And actually, I think you're bringing up a really good point. I don't think we should make people have to enter their email to get on the site.
I hate that. I hate that. And
I hate that. And I don't do it.
Yeah.
So like a couple times, there's definitely stuff I would have purchased and bought. Like I was saying to Greg that like I actually do click links on Instagram pretty often. Like I pretty often like shop and do stuff off Instagram. The second I have to put my email address in, I'm done.
Yeah, me too.
I will put my email address in. Like if you're giving me like a 15% off coupon, like a lot of times, especially if I'm like somewhat interested in the product, like I have no problem putting my email address in and I'll get the coupon, which I do think is a good hook because half the time now they've got my email and I don't buy anything. But I agree with you that like, I don't love when you have to put your email address in, I jump off.
Yeah, it's the turn off, and it's, they're just trying to get your email. Then you get if you do it, then you get the email soliciting email the next day. Like, what they're doing. And that's
totally.
okay too. You want to make it more organic. Like you want to make it like you're part of whatever, US rowing or US lacrosse. And so then you get this email, then it's more organic. You don't feel like you're just like an email to them and on their list.
Yeah, we just don't want to be an email to them. You want to be
real.
You
know what I mean? Like, why you're hooked in because you did something and it's like against your will. And it's just a turnoff. I think it's a turnoff to the customer and the trust you want to build. Like some people do it because that's their model, right? But you don't have to do that way.
No, totally. I'm in 100% agreement.
Well, that brings up a really interesting point. At what point have we proven enough value to ask people to become a member? And when do we like say, listen, you're sort of using a site that's for members and we want you to at least put in your email. What point do we do that? And is it like after 5 minutes we say, hey, listen, you're on, there's so many benefits you've already seen being on the site. Or is it 5 pages or 10 pages? I would try to say after 3 pages, they're already seeing benefits of what they're going to get on UB Sports. And
I'm trying to think I think it's.
There might be another way. I'm a technology person, but there might be another way. Like maybe it's like you visit the site once and then you don't harass them. They come back. Maybe there's a way that they can do it that way. I wouldn't want to be surfing and looking at a score or watching some highlight and then all of a sudden I see this thing pop up. I hate that. Like, and that's the model to get. I get it, but there might be.
I love that you use the word harassed.
I feel harassed. I mean, it's like the pop up, like give us your email, and if you can't have any content unless you get your email. I think that's the wrong message to grab a consumer, and it doesn't work for me. And
I think it's all how you. I think it's how you position it. So, like for instance, I think it's the New York Times does this because I go on their site for recipes a lot.
Oh, I do too.
But they kind of give you like you can read 5 stories before you have to become like a subscriber. And I think that like quite frankly, everyone manages the fact that they only read 4 or 5 stories and then they're done. I think that if you position it in the way that if you sign up, you have access to exclusive content or you have access to, the ambassadors, I think you make it something that people want to do as opposed to feeling harassed into doing it is the perfect.
Well, you don't want to be blocked. I think when you go on a website and you're blocked from even participating until you give that, like it's that quid pro quo, you must give the email or the content's blocked. That's a turn off for me. Like,
right.
You're right. There's another way to do it. Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's go F you when I see that. I don't need you. And then, but there's got to be, what we want to do is find, the carrots, not the sticks. We want to say, hey, this is really great. You need, next time our Olympic athletes write a bulletin, if you want to get first dibs on it, or, see it first, join.
Or have a window pop up and say, hey, this is your third, story, like New York Times. You've accessed this site 3 times. Maybe you want to become a member. Then I don't feel like it's like, okay, I'm using the content. Okay, then it's more like, kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think you almost make it sound exciting to them, as opposed to being like, you must do this so that we can.
Yeah, this is your third
Make
visit.
money
You've
on it,
noticed you've been on the site 3 times, or read 3 articles, or clicked through 3 times, and then you make
Yeah.
it like, when you click through different parts of the site, it's like 1, 2, 3, or it's 3 articles, whatever it is. Like everybody does it. Then they pops up and say, hey, this is your 3rd article for free. Did you want to join? Like, I don't know. Like, you got to think about what your philosophy is. But
Yep.
Well, I think whatever they're doing, if they're doing it more than once, they're going through 3 or 4 pages, they're seeing value in what we're offering them. And if that happens, I think it should pop up in whatever they happen to be on. If it's yoga videos, or, ads, or updates from an ambassador for fencing or something. You just say, this ambassador writes every once in, regularly for you, if you want to see their, if you want to be first in on the next thing they write. And that's easy. We just write a template for that. And then the next time, the 3rd time somebody clicks on one of those things, we say, okay, you see the interest, you see the value in it, so let's make it the key to get them to sign up.
yeah, that's fair game. But just the blocking thing, like the withholding of content without joining, I don't react positive. It's like a psychological thing. I don't react positively to that. I just click right off.
I agree with you.
On principle, I don't like that,
But I think if someone's on the page, for 3 articles, let's say, and then they click, they say, no, I don't want to be involved. I don't want to have to join. And then they keep looking at another 3 articles. Then we have to say, hey, you are enjoying this. Come on. And, tag them and just get them gently. Just say, don't, so you are seeing the value. Why not just join? It's free. It'll never cost you anything. And all these benefits are yours.
Yeah, I mean, you got to ask these developers like what the model is. You got to do research too and decide what you like about other sites. Is it 3 articles? Is it clicking through to 3 different areas on the site? Is it reading like content of like, say, your sport, 3 articles, or is it clicking through to different parts of the site? Or what you got to decide what that's going to be, and then.
Yeah, in our conversations last week, we asked that.
I think Leslie brings up such a good point of, we don't want to turn people off. Like we just have to be, I think, really careful in how we position it, that we want to make them feel included, right? Like this is supposed to be like an including type group. And I think sometimes we just have to be really cautious, because a lot of that language can be very exclusive.
Yeah.
And annoy people.
Hey, John.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Hello. How's everybody?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Great. Is that a cold we hear, or is that you just haven't had to talk today?
What's that?
Well, you sound like you had a little. First things you said, you sounded like you had a cold or something, or
the Rona.
Oh, no, I don't. No, I don't know.
The Rona.
I don't want the Rona.
The Rona. Right.
Well, Greg, I didn't hear back from Dania. We talked last week at the end of the week, and I did just a quick outline of. I looked at all the surveys we had, and the feedback from those coaches was really pretty consistent. A couple things were like little tweaks per different specific to coaches, but basically it was kind of what we would have guessed. And I just made a super quick outline, but I didn't hear back from her, but I gave it to her to just look at. But I can certainly forward it to you. Just a quick outline. It's just the obvious things, what they want to do.
Yeah, I think, Leslie, not to jump in here, but I just, from a capability standpoint, just want to make sure that whether it's bullet points or whatever, that you guys are getting over to Greg, like the capabilities you would need out of that app. It's not necessarily like, I don't think that they can guarantee it's going to be a priority in the development phase, but I figured if we can ask, at least like you guys have powwowed and heard back from the coaches that like, we would like to be able to do X, Y, Z, like, I think that'll be just a helpful element in just feedback back to Greg and John.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like,
actually,
for instance, you
Dania's
would
up in
thought
the air
like,
right now. Dania's coming back from LA. She'll be
oh,
talking to
okay.
me later on this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, but like even like if you would have thought what coaches would have prioritized, you would have thought that live streamed games would be important, right? Like that's how they're like, you know, like if they can watch a game happening live, because a lot of these AU teams played in the summer, they would watch it live. But actually, the feedback was like they don't really like live stream games. They'd rather watch a live taped game, which I don't really, you know, it's kind of the same thing, but that's like a certain thing that was consistent. Like they seem to like the tape live games and they don't like highlight reels, which is what you could have got because you can tweak those and make yourself look better than you are, you know, but
Right.
that's interesting. And I think maybe also like there's a thing called baller TV, I know in basketball, which is a good idea because people don't always go to these, it's all about traveling to these, you know, these, convention centers for these games. And they'd get like grad students or undergrad students that would sit there and just move the camera like back and forth in the court. And they were so bad. Sometimes I'd have to say, you know, the ball's over on the other side of the court. They go, oh yeah. And they, you know, but they're doing it to get the live stream effect. So people that parents want to watch it, you know, they have to be there physically, but it's really bad. You know, they're not really, you know, it's just like whoever they can get cheap to hold the camera and and they've got like, you know, 50 courts to cover. So it's not great. Maybe that's why, but those coaches seem to want, you know, taped games over live stream games, and that's probably easier, right? You know, in some ways for you guys, unless you're Baller TV or you're going to hook up with Baller TV or whatever, right?
Well, Huddle also has a new camera system that you put into midfield and the camera will follow the ball wherever the ball is or a puck.
Yeah, because I've seen it. These are like young guys. They're like reading a book, and then they're like look up, and then you know it's the game started, and they're not, you know. I mean, but the idea is right because they're trying to figure out how to get people watching their kids at the game when they can't take off in the middle of the week for 3 days and go to like Louisville, like for what, you know, it's not reasonable. But
sure. So okay, so leaving off, John, where we left off last time we were talking, to take up there, the emails that we send out and opting out of those things. We were thinking of different categories. I don't know if you've come up with, you know, if you have a list of your own, but, you know, we were thinking, of course, the corporate ones you can never opt out of, right? Then stuff, updates and bulletins from the sport ambassador. You should be able to opt out of that sport. And then third party, you know, when you first sign up, there are going to be those, do I want to be notified by third party partners or ourselves or that kind of stuff? And needs to be opt outs for that. And that's typical. Event notices and invites. And I can see two categories of that. One is local ones to person within their 20-mile radius or whatever. And then national invites, because someone might not want an invite to squash tournaments half a country away, but they want them local.
Yeah, I would think, I mean, you can probably get a little too granular, but I would think that there's value in receiving notices within your state.
Yeah.
Not just a 20-mile radius, okay? You know, I'm far removed from athletic, like high school athletic competition, but high school athletics really are based on a state level before they ever go on to national. So you might want to remain in touch with a state and not just a 20-mile radius.
Point.
That is a good point. We used to do that actually when I worked in pro sports, like there's like league mandated, like you can only market for like your territory, which is a different radius for every league. Like I think the NHL is 50, but like the NFL 75. But that's a good point that like it is state based. So that would be a helpful. And John, I think to your point about being granular, we were actually just talking about this, like in immediate feedback back to the programmers, like, can we just say that we would like the option to be able to customize our opt-outs, or do we have to actually give the opt-out list right now?
I think you kind of need to define them.
Okay, I was just asking.
I don't know. Like we could put language in the spec that there are multiple levels of opt-out, but if you don't specify them, it's going to be very challenging for them to come up with a database model, like the relationship of what types of things have to correlate.
Okay, that makes
to-
sense. I mean,
to
I
an
think we were just
opt-out.
trying to figure out, like, as Greg and I and Leslie just joined in too, as we were spitballing, we had kind of come up with a list, and then like within chatting, we'd come up with like 4 more. So our thought was like, here we are, like when this website launches 3 months from now, odds are we will have thought of 3 different ones, or maybe want to change them. And so I understand your answer is helping me understand why we might need to define it. But maybe if we could just get an understanding of like I mean, is it a number? Like, I don't even know what our parameters are. Like, do we
Yeah.
get to opt out of 6? Do they need it 10? Like, does it have to be
I
tied to something?
I don't think there's a limit. Obviously, I don't think having, 3 things to opt out of, or 10 or 100 is the significant issue versus the types of things that you're going to opt out of. In other words, one of the things that you mentioned is you want to be able to opt out of a sport. Well, maybe I want to opt out of baseball messages, but I want messages from my baseball team. Right? So,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want a baseball opt-out to override my ability to get messages from the team I belong to.
Correct.
So that's an example of the type of definition I think we need to clarify, and that's more important than the volume of things that we're going to want to allow them to opt out of.
I think right there, if you're a member of a team, you shouldn't be able to opt out of the team you belong to. That doesn't even make sense, right? But
Yeah, it's like sports you, like you just
perhaps.
get them and they never stop unless you know.
And that may be very well true. But that language would have to be in the spec that when you opt out of a sport, if you belong to a team that's in that sport, the opt-out does not override your team membership overrides the opt-out for that sport or category or activity or whatever. Okay.
Well, that shouldn't be that hard. You're a team that you're a member of a group, and then we could have, group opt-outs.
Yeah.
Particular groups, right? And then the sport is above that, so it'd be a sport opt-out. So the group would be automatically separated in that question. And it might be you want to say, I want to opt out of my team. I also want to opt out of the sport in general. Or it might just be, cue back when it's my season for it again. I don't want to see skiing stuff in July. I want to see skiing stuff in October or September. And maybe it's every year you want to erase the opt-outs for seasonal sports, and then say
no.
You don't want to. Okay,
you can't have audit. You can't have, if someone has chosen to opt out of something, you cannot have automated processes that undo that.
So they have to come back
the only
in.
Exception.
Right. So how do you do that if they come
back in for something?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's part of their profile preferences, right? So I can go in and modify what I've opted in and opted out of. The only kind of override I think that you would have is, let's say I opt out of basketball. If I then join a basketball group,
yeah,
I would start getting that basketball group's messages, but that would not override the general basketball opt-out. You would still opt them out of everything except that one basketball group.
So we probably should ask them again, if they join a basketball group, if they want to get back into basketball updates.
Well, I don't know that you prompt them and ask them that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good girl, Whitney.
Some people won't want that. They'll just want to have their team communication, and that's all they want. They don't need to peruse around and watch videos of the NBA. They're just there for their kid's team or something, and it's too much, right? They have a narrower, focus.
Sure.
So I think
for example,
use it for that.
I play on 6 softball teams. but I don't want to get softball
Right, right.
messages.
Right.
But I do want to get a message from each of my teams. Now, when I joined team one, if you question me, well, do you want to now get all general, all the softball messages? And I say no. Then I joined team two and you ask me the same question. And then I joined team three and you ask me the same question. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, you're gonna get
that's a poor experience.
Yeah.
You know, if someone opts out of, let's say, basketball in general, and then joins a basketball team, they just start getting messages for that team. They don't get general basketball messages from all over the country or other groups or ambassador basketball messages or whatever. If I do want to start getting that, I go into my preferences and say, I turn it on.
All right, so whenever you opt out from something, there has to be someplace in your account preferences that says I've opted out of this. Do I want to unsubscribe or resubscribe?
Yeah, and it's going to be very similar to the screen that you have now for the frequency of messages, where I can go in and say, well, I want, notifications immediately. I want notifications on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever.
Yeah.
One of the choices is going to be opt out.
Right.
That's going to be on that page. So, we'll have to work with we'll have to clarify among ourselves the precedence level, so I can opt out of a sport, but when I join a team, I'm automatically opted in for that team, and that team opt-in overrides the sport opt-out. Right. So there's a hierarchy, or there's a precedence there. And that kind of definition is what needs to be in the spec. And it's those kind of relationships that are more important than saying, well, how many opt-outs can we have? 6, 10, 20, 500, whatever,
Right.
I think it's those relationships that become most important in defining what they are.
Yeah, it's the kind of opt-outs, not how many opt-outs.
Yeah.
And how, right. And what
With the people might not want to hear like the latest lacrosse, new cleat that's on sale. They might want to be, might want to be bombarded with that stuff. They might not want to see that. They might not, the e-commerce stuff. They might not want to have those, and might not want to see those, right?
Yeah, same thing for scores.
Yeah, I mean, I thought
game results.
Totally.
Yeah, and I kind of feel that opting out of product-related promotions, which would be emails that are specific. Oh, we're having a sale in the store. Check out this new brand of shoe or racket or what have you. I think that's a totally separate category that you opt out of. I might want to stay totally involved in getting all the communications about a sport, but I don't want you sending me stuff to go buy stuff in the store.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that would annoy me too.
Now, you may have some emails that go out that are basketball related that may have some kind of call to action to go buy a particular piece of equipment. That doesn't make that a product communication that you would opt out of, right? So even if I've opted out of e-commerce, let's say, whatever we call it, the fact that you include a shoe ad, or the fact that there's a blurb that says check out our sale in the store today or something. I mean, I don't think that e-commerce opt-out would apply that way, as long as there was some other information in that email.
Yep.
Be it training tips or something new on the site or whatever.
No, that's strategic, John. I like that. Like, I used to kind of slink some product information at like the bottom of our best opened emails. And that's kind of a way to do it subtly without people feeling like, all right, I bought a paddle racket and now I keep getting these freaking emails about paddle rackets. Like, I'm not a professional. I'm not buying 5 a season. I've already bought my paddle racket. I don't need to know more. But I think when you put like a little thing at the bottom of like an email though, like that's a more subtle way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be like kind of a fuzzy line when you look at a particular piece of communication that goes out. As you write that copy and that promotion and you craft that email, there's a fuzzy line as to, does this fall under a sport communication? Does it fall under an e-commerce promotion? You know, so somebody, as they develop that email, that promotion or that communication, someone has to make, on our side, has to make that decision. Well, where does this fall? If they go to opt out of this, what is it that they're opting out of? Right, so that burden is on the creative team that develops that communication and what the objective is. And it could be simply based on the fact that the majority of content in that email is about the sport and not about products. You know, it could, but it does lend itself to a very subjective perspective with a fuzzy line as to where these things fall, but somebody ultimately will have to make that decision.
I mean, I know like I get the US rowing stuff a lot now, and they have these partnerships and I can't opt out of anything. I'm either on their list or off their list, and they are promoting like backpacks, back to school. I mean, whatever they're, you know, they've got a partnership, I get it. And I don't think I have, it's either all or none. I don't think I have the finesse to opt out of certain things. So, you know, that, it, you know, I guess that it would have.
Yeah, you know,
hard.
You know, that lends itself to, you know, the simpler you make it. Let's say you just say opt out of all UB sport communications, opt out of just third-party marketing, you know, whatever it is, those very 2 or 3 basic ideas and concepts. The worst thing that's going to happen is someone's going to get inundated with emails. And what you don't want is for them just to opt out of everything because they're just getting too many. So the more granular that you make it, the more you fine tune the ability for a member to control their opt-outs and communications, only enhances their experience.
Yeah, I
because
agree.
I can now, right, I can control what I'm getting to a certain level.
Right, and then they're more likely to stay on, right?
Yes, you know, and chances are they're going to eventually buy something or click to see this, and you know, which generates ad revenue or whatever. So we can fine tune it. Like, and the example I used last week, of course, was Facebook. If you go into your Facebook notifications preferences, there's like, you know, 200 or 300 different things. And to me, that's kind of overkill, but Facebook does that because you tend to be able to keep them opted into stuff, because who the hell goes through 200 things saying this is what I want and don't want?
Right, no one takes the time.
Right, so there is a point of overkill. And I think the idea is we really just want to kind of come up with the list of what are the objectives for our communication. And if you as a member, what kind of stuff, you know, I don't want to know about anything about softball that happens in high school, college, across the country. So I'd opt out of softball, but I still want the softball messages from my softball teams. You know, to me, that's a very obvious delineation that's valuable. You know, maybe you say, you know, another example, I guess, is if I join a sport, basketball, maybe I don't want high school related communications, but I do want college related communications, or I want professional communications like pro basketball or something. You know, is that a delineation that's valuable? Is it useful to people? Is it overkill? You know, that kind of thing. So there, to me, there are some natural groupings of things that makes sense.
Right. I mean, you think about it like,
And that's where I think,
I mean, that's exactly right, because someone who's like their kids in high school and they're a parent, they don't, maybe the mom or whatever, then I ended up following the pros. They want to just follow the regional like playoffs. That's one of the things that the AD high school ADs are look like, how do we get this information out? And the schools don't do it very well. It's the AD's job. How do you track what's going on in the community, like for regionals or playoffs or whatever, or states? They want to just opt in on that. That's what they want to see, like a regional kind of high school perspective. They don't care about pro. So you have to definitely make a distinction between college, high school, regional, and even like travel, maybe even like travel team. There's 4 different areas, right? If it's because youth sports is travel team, high school, and then you've got college and pro. So you have to make a distinction, because you might get moms of high school kids versus college athletes who want to watch their friends. My daughter watches her friends in college. She doesn't care about high school now because she's in college. It's all about her friends playing in college. High school's like in the rearview mirror, right? So it's going to change, but you have to make a distinction between those 4 different, categories of athletes, right? And the people who are following them.
yeah. And the one thing that I would be cautious about, and I don't know enough about like high school sports perhaps, but in Pennsylvania, where I grew up and where I know most, there's districts. So my high school is in a certain district, which encompasses X number of high schools. So when you say regional, like Greg, you said, if it's within 20 miles of your zip code or something like that, that to me, that doesn't fit in with like high school regional sports, where I might want communications from a specific district within Pennsylvania. And I'm not sure exactly how we define it, because it's inconsistent from state to state and everything else, right? So I don't know how you define that, but I would be really careful about just saying within 20 miles of my zip code, because I don't think that fits. A travel baseball team for, teenagers, teenage boys, let's say, I might travel to 3 or 4 different states. So, kind of restricting it to a 20-mile radius doesn't work in that scenario. So I'm not sure how we can kind of accomplish.
I think you do it by, you're
definition.
right, it's high school is district, because in the playoffs you go beyond your district. So there's different levels. It's by region of public high schools. And there's Catholic, leagues, all kinds of different leagues that are private leagues. There's prep school leagues, public leagues, that's by district. And then you can do state, which is like the broader, like regional and playoffs of whatever sport. But then the travel team, you're right, it encompasses, it's regional. So the travel team, like like look at lacrosse. Lacrosse is basically an East Coast sport. So it's like New York, and I would go to these tournaments. It's like New York versus Maryland. That's what it was. It was like New York and Maryland teams, and that was it. But their kids come from New Jersey and Connecticut, but it kind of spanned that multi-state area. And you would never get really, like even in basketball or lacrosse, you wouldn't get a team from California. We never played anyone in California. It's always that regional. You might get a team from the Midwest, Chicago, once in a while you see them, but it's very regional by multi-state, Northeast, Southwest, like that's what it is. You have to think about a region for travel sports, because very rarely are kids from sometimes you get California on the elite, like Nike sponsored teams. We play teams from California at the elite level, but for 90% of travel teams, it's going to be by multi-state, region.
Right. And then, college is done by conference, I think, for almost everything, right? I mean, it's conference, the conference is the primary grouping of different colleges, I think, right?
Yes.
Like you have your Pac-10, your Big Ten, your Patriot League, whatever. So maybe that's how you break down the college level. And then professional, I think, is just, it's professional.
I think the hardest would be like the regional, like high school level. It's easier at the top because they've already defined the groupings for us, right? By league, right?
Yeah, and maybe for high school, maybe it's too cumbersome to break it down by, the district level or something. So maybe you have to do it by state. The unfortunate thing there is I know that in Easton, Pennsylvania, the conference that Easton High School is in, where I graduated, their biggest rival is in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and they're in the same district. District 11 in Pennsylvania. So that district does span states. So I don't know if that's a consideration. It certainly complicates. The whole thing is complex because nothing is really perfectly geographical. You can't overlay these things perfectly on a map with geographical boundaries. In any case, I think, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but those are the concepts and the way the opt-out functionality should be built. And if we can define these things, it'll give you not just us, but the members as well, the ability to kind of really focus in on what they want. And it makes their whole membership that much more valuable. Keep in mind that we might be able to define an elaborate system for this, but maybe we only implement it at a small level, a portion of it. Maybe we do, like for high school, for example, maybe we do it by state now, knowing that in the future we'll break it down into districts. Okay, so that's something that we can put in the spec, and when we work with the developers, they're going to say, oh, well, this kind of is way out of scope, or we can't accommodate this. We back off and say, what can we do right now? So you break the high schools down to the state level, but the plan, the way the system is built, will support the addition of district level stuff later. Okay, so it's important for us to kind of understand what we want, even though it may not all be built on day one.
Yeah, that's the goal, because I know just talking to 80s, and I think Greg and I spoke about it. It's like, that's what's missing now. You think of all these, I've even read like the other day in the news, like some Hartford local papers going out of business. It's one of the longest local papers, all these local papers are dying. It's a big thing, right? And so, and they don't have the money or the infrastructure, and maybe not even they're going to exist to support local sports. So that it falls on the AD of each school to try and promote his program, his players, his program, his teams, whatever. That's what this is a huge opportunity for, because you're going to replace, the internet's going to replace local coverage of sports, right? And so if that's not being given to these parents, and there are millions of, there are more little high school players out there than there are, pro players, right? I mean, everyone wants to have their little town and their information from their district and whatever sport that might be. And that's a huge opportunity, because if it's not being done adequately, that's a big opening to do that. So I think you're right, that has to be broken down eventually. The goal would be by district. You want the parent to go in there, punch in their team. What's the playoffs? What's the standings? Everybody does that. Everybody checks their little local team, whether they care just because they live in the community or because their kid's playing. That's huge.
And Greg, maybe this is something we need to consider, not so much in the development of the site, but more in it's what I would call the configuration and setup of the site. So if you look at basketball, for example, we have a basketball group, and under that you have teams. Maybe we, for any of the high school sports, maybe we need to define the district groups. Pennsylvania District 1, Pennsylvania District 2, Pennsylvania District 5. Maybe we need to define those groups initially, even though you may not have an ambassador or someone who is managing that group, but it allows you to build your groups within that hierarchy. So when a team comes in and creates a team, they would, if I create a high school basketball team group for my team, I would naturally be driven to put it underneath the district that I belong to. So there's that natural hierarchy almost. In college, you could do it by conference. You have, basketball in college. So not just the basketball group, but under that, you have your conferences. So when the basketball coach for Alabama creates their team page or takes control of that page or whatever, they naturally fall under that hierarchy that they're in, you know, is that the Southeast? I don't even know what conference it is, Southeast Conference or whatever it is, right? But it would naturally fall under that. You're muted, Greg.
Muted.
Yeah, sorry guys, the mowers outside. Yeah, I think it's, we have to, there's some that we do, if you sign, if you're building a group, it says, are you a member of a multi-layered organization? And that you can assign Ubers and subs. So if you're say you're a league and you sign up, you're, you know, there's a national organization or state organization, and then there's teams underneath you as, you know, since you're a league. We could probably do the same thing, have, okay, what organization are you a part of when you sign up for that group, when you're signing in that group, whether it's a team or a league, and that would give you the opportunity to start building that strata, the next stratum up.
Right. The only question I would have about that is, you know, in the realm of amateur sports, really, as opposed to organized.
Yeah, school sports.
Competitive sports,
yeah.
Is, you know, I'm the coach of a softball team, so I create a group for my softball team, you know, and yes, we, you know, our league belongs to the ASA or the USAA or whatever it is called now. They've just changed their name like a year ago.
Right.
But ultimately, there may be some kind of hierarchy at that point. But my league, you know, we, UB Sports, would never have the ability to identify every league that's out there for amateur softball, right? Adult recreational softball. So my league may not exist. So to me, okay, I create my group page for my softball team, and maybe I don't even associate it with ASA or the national governing. I just know it's a softball team, and that's
right.
Fine. So it's like, if you think of it as a hierarchy, it's kind of like an orphan. You know, it's an orphan team that doesn't have a league or anything else above it, right? So, you know, that becomes the challenge, because then later, if somebody comes in from the league and creates a league page, you know, you're not going to be able to automatically link up that orphan team.
Right.
You know, somebody that manages that team is going to have to say, oh, our league now exists, so I should join that league. I'm not sure how that would work, which is kind of irrelevant at this point. But so maybe back to my original point, is maybe with the organized competitive sports like high school and college, and even perhaps professional. I mean, I'm less concerned about the professional realm right now. But with high school and college sports, we can predefine these groups.
Right.
You know, yeah, and then you can have like adult leagues. Adults are going to come in. There's nothing. You have little like you know, little league for kids that's run by either the recreation of the town. I mean, it gets so huge, right? I think you start with what you can control, and then the adult soccer league in Wyoming. I mean, you know, who's gonna, you know, there's no, that's beyond what you're able to do, right?
But I do think Leslie had a really good point about the newspapers going out of business and people needing an outlet for like checking their kids' stats and like their 5 minutes of fame or whatever. Like, I think that's a really valid point.
It's huge. It's huge because there are millions and millions of people that love their kids. They buy products, they want to hear the news, and maybe they're just regional, local. Think about like Ohio, right? My parents are from Ohio. It's all about football. And I bet high school football here is more important than anything, right? Like,
yeah. I think that's a really valid point you had. I just wanted to chime in and just think that I think that's really important.
All right.
So are you going to make a list? Like, what's the goal? You're trying to make a list like for the developers now about what to.
Yeah. Well, we need to make it dynamic, right? You're right.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to be able to kind of descriptively tell the developers, this is how we want our opt-outs built. So we got a little bit further, you know, the discussion of opt-outs led to this other conversation about how do we manage the relationships between teams and groups and things like that. But it highlighted the need for us to really consider how we build the opt-outs. You know, if you have that hierarchy and I opt out of basketball, I might want to continue to get, you know, the Big Ten stuff, but not all basketball.
Right.
Or I
Some
want to be able to get
people
my
want to get
team stuff.
they want to get their alumni college scores of Duke. They went to Duke and they love Duke basketball. That's all they care about. They don't have kids in high school. They don't even have kids. They just,
Right.
like, it's so many different levels. You're right. You have to be very specific, I guess.
Right. So I think the takeaway at this point, I don't think it's going to be super productive to try to hone this list in on this call, but I think we need to, as a takeaway, we need to kind of understand maybe another conversation online together or something, but I think we need to refine what is that hierarchy as it specifically relates to the opt-outs. Now it's dependent on us understanding what the group and team hierarchy is in order to define those opt-outs. They almost go hand in hand, but it's not a direct correlation necessarily. And if you really think about it, I mean, in the concept of building our entire site and apps, being able to opt out of something seems like such a trivial, unimportant piece. And it's just a small piece of what we have to do compared to everything else. But it's important, and it's going to help us define and understand what are we missing in the creation of the site. You know, how do we build this hierarchy if that's something we really want to do?
Yeah.
I mean,
You know, and
I guess
maybe you don't have a hierarchy. Maybe being a state level high school district for sports is at the same level and is equivalent to just a team that's in that sport. Maybe we don't need those hierarchies, and it's up to the members to say, well, if you want to kind of be all informed, you have to join the team, you have to join the league, you have to join the district, kind of thing. So maybe there's no technical hierarchy and the burden is on the members initially, but it helps you, I think, understand how are people going to want communications for stuff.
Mhm.
You know, I always go back to my example. I play a lot of recreational softball. I would stay in tune with anything that's related to any of my teams and any of the leagues that my teams are in, but I don't want nothing else.
Right.
Everything else is irrelevant to me and is a nuisance. So that's the takeaway, I think, is how do we define this? How does it fit into the realm of what we're doing without being overly complicated and too challenging to define and build, but still gives us the ability to provide that flexibility to our members.
Can I ask a question? I mean, you guys envision, like, let's say like the Duke basketball. Everyone who went to Duke, by definition, they love Duke basketball. It's like they're brainwashed for this. So they go about their lives. They want to know, they don't play basketball, they don't have kids, they're doing their life, and they want those Duke basketball scores. Do you envision the person getting on the site and finding them, or do you envision them being flagged and those being spoon fed in their email, like any kind of score, like being flagged? Is that too hard? You know what I mean? Like if I want to follow scores, would I get like if a score comes in of something, I want to follow a sport. I want to follow like, I don't know, the Lakers or something, right? You want to follow a sport. It's up to me to get on the website and find it. You don't envision a site where that's going to be proactively like sent to the person. They can sign up for notifications, kind of like you don't envision that. That seems very hard.
Well, I think it depends. I think, let's say I join and I join the Lakers page as a fan. Okay. I don't know that there's necessarily an automated process that you would go through that would link them up into, the basketball sport or whatever, but it certainly would allow you to drive communications. So you could have an email that goes out that says, oh, well, these people like the Lakers, or these people like the Nets, or these people like, whatever team. So why don't we promote joining the professional basketball group, or the basketball group in general?
Yeah.
So you can identify that stuff, and that could be an automated process that anybody that signs up as a fan, or a player or coach or something for a particular team in a sport, you can say, oh, well, they just signed up. Why don't we trigger some promotional email to encourage that? Here are other groups you might like.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And that can be somewhat automated. It would seem, though, that would be manually initiated by the marketing people. Like every 3 months, somebody will pull a list of members from the database, all the people that have, that belong to a basketball team that don't belong to the basketball group. Send them an email encouraging, promoting that basketball group.
Right.
So you can definitely do that, but I would see that would be, I don't know that you would automate that, and I don't see that an automated
Yeah,
process to
that
do
sounds
that is
very-
going to
yeah,
fit
just-
into the initial scope, but it
Mhm.
can certainly be done.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't have to be in the initial scope, but and there are sites that'll do that. They'll say, what are your favorite teams of your football? And you mark off, Patriots, Cowboys, blah, blah, blah. And that's tedious, though. You have to really be into it. And I don't think we want to be in the situation where we're becoming a fan site.
Yeah.
I want to keep that sort of on the player side, not really going into the fans. Of course, the fans are available. The fan stuff is available because it's part of the news.
If you focus more on the player or coaching side of it, as opposed to the fans, the same concept applies in that if you have someone who signs up who says, well, I'm the coach of a basketball team, and that basketball team is, in the Big Ten or something, you could promote, well, here's some other basketball teams you might want to follow. Because if you're a coach of a team, you kind of want to stay in touch with your competition in your conference, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe not, but so even from the competitive side, the non-fan side, that concept that I described still applies. You can still pull that list of members and promote other stuff.
Right.
I would think, of course, that someone who coaches a high school or college team, they're probably going to be a little more proactive in saying, well, this is these are the other things I want to follow.
Right.
So maybe it's less likely, whereas on the fan side, it's less likely that a fan, if I say I'm a Duke basketball fan, it's less likely that person is going to go seeking out other things like, well, I should also follow Duke football, or,
Right.
Who's Duke's biggest opponent? North Carolina or something like that, maybe, NC State or something. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really know, but, maybe you would promote to them, here's some NC State stuff you might want to stay in touch with or whatever. So that whole concept does apply, even if you're looking at it from a player or coaching side, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. So is that also for later or for now?
Well, we can identify it as something we want in the spec as we flush this out. But, I pretty much believe that at some point we're going to write up the spec and then, you know, Greg, you and I and the developers are going to come to a head and say, well, okay, for, you know, the scope that we have and the, you know, cost that we've quoted you and the timing that you've requested, we have to make some hard decisions as to what to include and not include. You know, that's the way the process is going to go. So
Well,
we
one
can
of the
put
things I'm glad we did is,
everything in it.
you know, I think it's important to say, listen, we want to add at least the functionality that we have now and the categories that we have now on the site. And that's something I sent them last week. I said, at very least, you know, we're going to start off with the base framework of the new site being what's already on the old site. So we can't be.
I think, Greg, even if you do that and we can verbalize all of the existing features and functions of the site now,
Right.
I think we're still going to run into that brick wall where it's like, okay, there's too much in the existing site. Okay, we quoted you based on just the stuff that you kind of verbally described or visually showed us in your walkthrough of the site, the stuff we've discovered. But, you know, there's a lot of stuff in that site right now, some of which, in my opinion, is not critical to the initial launch of the site. Okay, so I still believe that we will come to that point where we have to pick and choose even from the existing functionality that we have and say, what are we going to drop out and what are we going to, you know, what do we have to keep?
Okay.
And some of those decisions might be very difficult decisions for you to make.
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, we have a time constraint and we have a budgetary constraint, and that's going to drive the priorities of what's most important to include. I don't believe that you can replicate the functionality, all of the functionality that you have in your site now under the current cost and time constraints.
Right.
Which I know was your original objective. And that's one of the key things. If you can keep the spec vague and the, you know, the contract vague and that kind of thing, it allows you to say, well, this should be part of it. This should be, you know, this was supposed to be part of it. And, you know, then you get the developers are saying, well, that's not, and then they walk away in the middle of the project.
Well, that's why we have to make it upfront. We have to make sure that we keep it, you know, open. And we're going to have a conversation on Wednesday about this, and we have to make sure that, you know, they understand that we're starting off with the current site as the base. And if they, you know, we have to get their agreement to, and have that in as much writing as possible.
You can't approach a development team and say, the existing site is the base. This has to be part of it, because there's some stuff in our site that happens that neither you nor I are even aware that these are functional elements within the site.
Right.
So if we can't verbalize them, you know, we just say, oh, well, you know, this is what the program does. I didn't know this was like really a separate function, but it does this, you know, that's a hard argument.
It is a hard argument
to make, right? So while I appreciate and will work towards that objective that the existing site should be the base for what we're doing, I don't think that eliminates the fact that we're going to run into this conversation at one point that says, okay, there's too much stuff here. We can't do it all. What are we going to do about it?
Right.
Maybe make your original, like a short list of what the functional goal can be to start, and then you can build upon that.
Yeah, and you prioritize. Well, we absolutely have to have these things. These would be important, but not critical. These are nice to have. And these are the things we can overlook right away. So, you know, in a real basic sense, you can prioritize things like that. And you say, you know, like you absolutely have to have your login and registration process.
Right.
You know, you have to have that. Okay, so that becomes a priority one by nature of what it is.
Right.
You know, putting comments on videos. maybe that's not important to the functionality of the site at this point. So that falls off.
Right.
That's a good point.
So at some point, there is going to be a point where we're going to have to deal with this with the developers, and they're going to say, look, if this is really what you want, it's going to cost you another $100,000, and it's going to take another 6 months to do it.
Right.
Which is not what we want, and it's surely not what they want.
Yeah, I think Phil's got a good point. We got to pick and choose our battles.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it sounds like, since Greg's focus is all about, like youth, I would start with the youth and the recruiting with the coaches. Sometimes things travel like word of mouth, right? The coaches, if they're using it for recruiting, and then the players are using it of their team, maybe focus on youth, and then maybe not the pro, not worry about that stuff, and focus on maybe recruiting, right? Think about what you want to get, and try and get those partnerships with like the USA lacrosse and USA rowing. Just get that, because that's the carrot. They're going to follow the coaches, they're going to follow the organizations. Try and focus on that, and the applications you need, like with technology, to make those things kind of get that kind of, that whatever, the technological whatever, space to do that, right?
Yeah, and it's no secret that I'm out of touch with recruiting at the high school, at the college, at the pro level, et cetera. But to me, if I have to sit back and kind of say, what's, the biggest feature, to me, it would be the matriculation of high school athletes into college,
right,
is the big thing.
I agree with you.
To me, that's the point. I don't think college to the pros is as big, because the audience of college athletes that get recruited and migrate into a professional sport is such a small percentage of the universe of college athletes.
And also
right?
those guys, like from a scouting perspective, the scouts of all the pro teams, quite frankly, have already drafted the kids in high school. So like, they're not usually even like a lot of them have already been drafted, but also they have their own systems and stuff like that. Like, we're not competing with that. But I think, to Leslie's point, we have a shot of competing with the guys that are in college, like the D1 coaches right now that are looking for stuff to recruit the high school guys. And I think when we're prioritizing, we don't need to touch professional level right now, because we're certainly not competing with ESPN from a content perspective. Like, we're certainly not going to be the place where somebody goes to find out what the score of the Lakers game was. Like, that's not, I think, going to be our specialty. Like, they're going to their tried and true ESPNs. They're going to their USA Todays. They're already doing that. Like, we don't need to compete with that right off the bat. But I think that we do have a really interesting space where we can start to carve out and make some noise. To your point, in the high school going to college, or the high school sports or stuff like that, or the training videos, like that's where we have a space in the world. I don't think we need to prioritize like trying to compete with ESPN from like a content perspective. Like, that seems to be wasted energy to me.
Yeah, I think it's regional and youth sports. It's regional and youth sports first, and then you get the college coaches, which is the top of that's the hierarchy of the regional youth sport. The college to go to, that's the focus. I think if you can get that space with the dying newspapers and content, and even like the whole, what is it, the ESPN has their high school channel. That just was invented like 10 years ago, and they don't even show all the games, and you can't even find these college games. Sometimes it's hard to find them. They're not all aired. That's really what it is. I'd start with the regional level, high school athletics. Those kids, it's all about sharing content and watching each other. And, it's like that kind of time of life where they're kind of spreading it amongst each other, like a rash, right? Somebody finds a site, they spread it. Like, that's kind of almost like organic marketing, right? Like, that's, I think, the way to do it. And then it bleeds into college, and the pro is just so I don't think it's a focus really, but now, right?
That kind of prompted me to think of a question. And let's say I'm a team coach, high school or college. And as a high school football coach, I have the game filmed. Every game we play is filmed. And I use that for practice to educate my players, see, here's how we did well, here's how we did poorly, et cetera, whatever. What would prevent a competing high school coach to gain access to that film?
You'd have to have it password protected or like a portal or something, because honestly, you're not doing your job if you're not trying to hack the rival team's video.
You put it on your
Right. So
you wouldn't have access. Yeah.
Like, I think if you could passport protect your, like if we had that as a
well,
feature.
or the membership of a particular team has
Correct.
to be approved.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
And in the long-term basis, you know, someone who's responsible for that team group would have to manage it, because once my high school player graduates and no longer plays for me, he could legitimately end up being on the coaching staff of my competition, but yet he's still part of my group.
That's where I think
so there is an on,
like as a team manager,
there
someone
isn't,
has to be the administrator.
yeah, I mean, so there is a process that someone who manages a team or group page will have to go through on a regular basis to purge old people out. And then the question becomes, well, should I still let alumni who played on the page? But that's where it gets funny. Well, what if somebody who played for your team now is coaching for the competition?
Yeah, but I think that
anyway, this is beyond.
That's something that people proactively manage.
Yeah, it's just something that popped into my head based on what Leslie just said.
Yeah,
it's like, how do you kind of deal with that? How does that get addressed? Even if there's not a way that we can accommodate it, it would be in, you know, your help files.
Yeah, I mean, I think
what
that,
are
I still get
what are
access
tips and
to,
tricks for managing your team?
Like, I still get access to all my hockey stuff from where I played in college, but like, I don't have access to footage that could help hurt them or whatever. Like, I think it's managed. I'm under an alumni setting.
Yeah, and like even like I know when my son played on a team a couple years ago, and then I went back on Sports U because the crew place I go, the crew, you know, rowing club I'm in, they use Sports U, and I just happened to go on, and they just, you know, they ended that connection because he's not on the team, right? So they kind of they organically will do that. Like the coach will say like, who's my roster this year? You're not on the team, you know. It doesn't carry over. Like the probably the coach would do that, right? And who manages, like just like you'd manage a Sports U. What kids are on the team that year? It changes from year to year. So that'd be the coach's job, I think, right?
Yeah, and when our site becomes as successful as we expect it to be, especially with the high school athletic directors, it almost seems that our site will cause the athletic director to create an administrative position for someone to manage our UB Sports team page.
I think like they're kind of already doing that.
I mean, they're dying.
Yeah, I mean,
I talked to a couple of them. They're dying for this. You know who needs this site? Athletic directors would love for this because they want a way to promote. They want a way to have their teams be seen by the community. That's their job. It makes their job easier. So I think the athletic directors of like high schools around the country would embrace it. You know, they have a whole page. Every high school in America, in theory, would have a page, right?
Yeah, and I think that just like
they'd have multiple for the various sports.
Like every team would have a page. You could see, and someone in the community who has no kid, just lives in the neighborhood, wants to see the regional playoffs. They can go on and see the highlights. They can see who the MVP of the state whatever soccer team was. It, you know, just a way for them to do their job more efficiently and get out the message and promote all their teams and their school.
And I think, John, to your point, like I know from as like, all right, I was the captain of the tennis team. Like I had to upload my entire team on TeamSnap and upload the schedule. Like I was in charge of that, like as my role as the captain of our like club tennis team. On the flip side, the hockey team I coach, we had a mom who was a manager, and she was in charge of managing the roster. And like she sent out an email, for instance, to the parents, and we're like, which parents want to be included on this, which ones don't. And so she managed who was getting the information, the schedule changes, and all of that. So I think that like that's two examples of, okay, it was discussed amongst my adult league that like I as the captain was responsible for that task. And then on a youth league, me as the coach, I wasn't. We had like a manager, so she did it. So like I think that that's a conversation that I think people are used to using digital communication at this point, and somebody's role is designated to be in charge of it.
Yeah, but I think if our site is used, let's say by a particular high school as extensively as we expect them to use it or want them to use it, that you can't have a player on the team being responsible, a captain or otherwise.
No, it would have to be
you can't have a parent because there's too much turnover.
No, I agree with you, but I think
So
it is an athletic director or a coach, or I'm assuming in that situation the assistant coach is in charge of it.
Yeah, or an administrative clerical type employee that works for the coaches or works for the athletic director and does it for all of the sports, you know. So in any case, my point was that it seems like you could just the management of like all the high school sports pages, like you could almost create a job that's full time just to do that stuff.
I think
that would show how successful we are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that from their perspective, that job's already created. Like the assistant coach, like that's what their job is at this point. And I think from a UB Sports perspective, depending on how much hand-holding those guys need, like we're trying to make this so user-friendly, right? That like any idiot can pick it up and figure it out. Like we're not managing any of it for them. We're building the tool to make it idiot-proof so that they can do it themselves, right?
Yeah, and you know, different people have different ways of doing it. You know, a small high school where your graduating class is maybe, you know, 100 kids or 150 kids, they might rely on a mom. And the fact that the mom changes every 3 years or something is irrelevant. But when you talk about a high school that maybe has 2,000 kids in a graduating class,
right?
You know, that's more than just a mom job.
Right, of course.
You know, so I think the way they use it will vary based on the particular circumstances surrounding that team or that school or whatever.
And the other thing that makes me think when you're talking about this is like, let's say your kid, like now I get like, so for instance, the crew example, your son goes and does a regatta and some mom posts pictures because she loves her daughter. And I thought I'd share the pictures of the girls team. And I get it, I'm the boys team, but I get the girls team. Okay, that's great. People are gonna upload videos of these teams. They're going to be on this team portal. They're going to upload videos. Parents going to take videos of their team. And the guy who missed the game, he's going to watch it there because he couldn't see it, right? So they're going to upload it on UB Sports on the team portal. Then you're going to have this backlog of years of games, right? It's going to happen too. You got to flush those out as well, but that's not our job. If they want to have, 10 years of running of some high school team that nobody deleted the videos, then so be it, right? But everyone has their 4 years and they move on, and they kind of follow, but it's someone has to manage that. But I agree with Kelly. I don't think that's our job. It could just accumulate,
Right.
Certainly not our job. We need to push the responsibility. We're just offering the platform to let them do it.
Right.
Yeah, Greg, you should make a note to yourself. We're going to have to discuss this at some point in the future, but what Leslie said raises a question in my mind that, okay, so you have a parent of a high school athlete, and I take pictures of the team during their regatta or whatever, and I want to post those pictures on the team page. I may be posting pictures of someone else's minor child.
Right.
But aren't all of these things disclaimers that we can just push off responsibility to them? Like, again, aren't we
Well, I don't think you could have a general disclaimer like when someone joins the site. Maybe when you join a team.
I think a team, and also when you post something.
People are going to post videos of their child's team, which includes 10, 20 other kids, right? That's right.
You can't really
Yeah, so let's say
YouTube video without either clicking or something that says that you have access and rights to this video. And it could be the same.
Yeah, but how do I like if I'm a parent of someone on that crew, but I didn't join the site and I didn't have my kid join the site, it's voluntary, right? I've never given permission. Anyway, my point is, Greg, you should make note of this because this is something that we need to discuss later as to where that responsibility falls at what point does the disclaimer come into play? Should it be when someone goes to join a team that's typically high school or younger, athletes? Like, where does that fall? We'll have to get some guidance, some legal guidance,
Yeah.
and we'll have to make a decision for ourselves where that falls into play.
To start off with,
I know I can go on Facebook and I can post pictures from my barbecue, which might have my neighbor's kids, and chances are nothing bad or malicious is going to happen, but there are some responsibility. There are decisions that have to be made over who's responsible and what responsibility you have.
Okay, so
for those
right
things.
Right off the bat, I would say we have to put it in the TNC right off the bat and take it for the terms and conditions, and then take it from there. And get more granular if we have to. But I think you're right. That immediately has to be in when you sign up for the site. That stuff is there.
Maybe it's part of the parent approval process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or the team
okay.
portal. When your coach signs you up to use UB Sports and makes a team portal, and your kid's on the team, then by definition, you're agreeing to the terms and condition of UB Sports. If some other posts a picture or an image or video, your kid.
There's other websites we can just knock off their legal. I mean, obviously, we should have a lawyer take a look and tell us what we should be doing.
Look at Huddle. I mean,
My point is that I think when you mentioned that some mom is going to post pictures of the team activity or something, it just lends itself to the question, who has rights to post pictures of my child? So at what point do I sign that disclaimer that says, I understand that there may be team photos that include my child or something. So maybe it's part of the parent. Anyway, that's a subject to discuss later, but I wanted you just to make note of that, Greg, because we can't let that fall through the crack.
Yeah, I have it on the list already. So we're covered there.
Okay, so we're going on an hour and a half here. I don't know how much time you guys all have, but I want to pull back to the opt-out topic, which is where this all started. But you see how critical the opt-outs are, because it lends itself to how do you define and everything else that we're doing. It really helps give you a bottom-up perspective as opposed to a top-down perspective. So I believe that each of us should probably spend a little bit of time kind of thinking through the opt-out hierarchy and what other things that we need. Ideally, if we can have kind of a regroup, either by email or some other communication. I don't know that we have to meet online again. But Greg and I are due to talk to the developers on Wednesday. We were due to give them at some point today kind of the definitions of the opt-outs plus these two other topics that we haven't even touched on yet today. But I think we're going to have to delay that, Greg. I don't know that we're going to have that today. So I think if we can all agree to put a little bit more thought into the opt-out structure, now that we kind of have a better understanding of what it should be and what it can be, to let's refine that list so that Greg and I can produce one list that we present to the developers. This is how we want the opt-outs to work. Whether it can all get done in the first phase or not is somewhat irrelevant, but it'll be the list that we can provide them for the spec.
So I think what we have to do on that is to say we know we have at least 7 that I have a list of right here of opt-outs that we need. But I think if we say we were going to have a total of 12 maybe or 15 opt-outs to start off with, that we can get through this with covering the first and second base and having third and fourth base yet to come, but we can do that as we come along over the next 3 months.
Well, I still think that we need to be able to provide the developers with kind of a descriptive relationship of the opt-out. So even if we say that, okay, it'll be anywhere from 15 to 30 opt-outs, we still have to tell them we're going to want people to be able to opt out of a sport, but not a team.
Right.
Or we want we want to remain opted in on a team, even though we opt out of a sport. So I think we need, even though we don't necessarily define that fully, we need to give the developers the type of relationships that they're going to be, because that means that the opt-out at the sport level is a wholly separate thing than opting in or out at a team level.
So why don't we just start a
Okay,
conversation on Slack, and then we'll put the list on and everyone can refine it, throw their 2 cents in, and we'll have one solid piece of communication by the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I think from an efficiency of time, like I think we've talked about this a lot, and I think we need to kind of just put some pen to paper and then just move on.
Okay, so like a master list of all the options, everybody can come up with what they can come up with opt out.
Greg's got a list. I think Greg's got a list, and I think John's got such good insight into like how we can maybe best present it to the developers, so that maybe Greg, if you want to just put the list on.
I'm starting a new channel. It's hashtag opt-outs.
Okay, great. So like, I mean, I think if we can all take a look at it, and John, I think you're so good at keeping us on track that like, if we start to go a little rogue in like the developer language world, if you could kind of maybe just pull us back. But let us know that if we can kind of, if everyone can kind of maybe have a deadline of 4 o'clock today to have comments in on that list, and then we can pull it back to what we think is appropriate to present to them. You're so good at being like, guys, this isn't reasonable. Like, this is going to tip them over the edge. Like, you know, keep us in line. You're going to have to yell at us, I think, every once in a while. But I think if we get this conversation going on Slack, we can probably pull it off, you know, in the next hour, 2 hours.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's going to
no
be
yelling.
team
I very
SRS.
rarely raise my voice.
I love it. But no, you're honestly, John, I think we're so appreciative of the fact that you speak that language. And I think that you'll keep us from either being too specific or not specific enough, but that this way everyone kind of has a visual of what the list is, because it's one thing to talk about it, but I think it's helpful to take a look at it on pen to paper, and then, you know, just give us some guidance of if we're getting off track.
Okay, so it's called Team SRS Clarifications.
Fabulous.
Okay, so we'll look on Slack and just chime in and give our thoughts, right?
Yeah, and everyone just try and do it in the next hour and a half, 2 hours, so that we give these guys enough time to get feedback back to the developers.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
The second topic that we wanted to kind of deal with was related to the user types and profile types. In order for them to really kind of spec out and define the types of screens that the site will have, which comes after the spec, of course, you really need to know what types of users you have. And Leslie, I don't think you were in the conversation last week with Kelly and Greg and I, but just for clarity, there's a term that we're going to use that's called user type. And a user type, there's basically 3 of them. There's an anonymous user, there's a member user, and there's an admin user. So when someone has an account on our site, they're obviously a member. Doesn't matter if they're a recruiter, a coach, a fan, an athlete, a parent, it doesn't matter. They're a member. An admin is someone who can be all of those kind of things, but also has some special abilities to do things that members can't do. Maybe search the database, maybe change logos on certain pages, maybe create new groups or new sports, or stuff like that. So that would be admin. So there's only 3 types of users, and those are the 3. And again, it's anonymous, who is someone who is not signed up, or maybe they have signed up, but they have not logged in. So they're going to see a bunch of public facing pages. Maybe they can see some sports pages, but only certain things about that sport. They may not necessarily see training videos that the ambassador puts up, what have you. That definition doesn't have to be done yet, but those are user types. Then there's what we're calling profile types, or alternatively, you could call it member types, okay? And these would be an athlete or player, a pro, and of course, I don't know what really distinguishes a pro from a regular athlete or player. Is it the fact that they get paid? I mean, I think you have some professional sports players who don't really get paid or something. Maybe that's false. Maybe. But anyway, that was kind of the side question I had.
Sorry, guys, I need to interrupt you, John. I'm gonna have to bounce, guys. But Greg, call me later if you need me.
All right, I will be sending you a text too.
Perfect. Okay, bye. Bye, guys. I'm so sorry. He's having a fussy moment.
Okay, bye.
Okay, see you, Kelly. So there's athlete or player, there's pro, there's coach, there's parent, there's a fan, or alternatively enthusiast, and there's recruiters. Two others that Kelly kind of came up with last week was a team manager, which is not necessarily team manager in the sense of a coach or someone who manages the team, but that would be more like the mom parent who says, I'm going to handle scheduling, I'm going to do the phone chain, I'm going to handle something like that. And then the other one was a facility or a resource manager.
Okay.
That's a totally separate
someone who manages
sports.
Someone who manages all the softball fields in New York City, for example. Someone who manages some or all of the tennis courts, et cetera. So those are the member types or the profile types. And we wanted to try to refine that list. I don't know that we necessarily have to get into detail discussing them, but if you can think of any others that should be added to that list, Leslie,
Okay.
please just let us know.
Like the team manager, because every sports, in any Division I or any college, they have operations manager. That's your operations manager. Number 6, your team manager can be a mom in a local little, group of a small team or, private group, or it could be the operations of a Duke basketball, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The most obvious example is when you have youth sports, 6 to 8-year-old kids who probably won't be using UV sports yet, but you have 6 to 8-year-old kids who are playing baseball or basketball. It's typically a parent who says, well, when practice is canceled, who starts the phone chain to let everybody know?
What about
things are a little different.
What about a town, like a town
Facebook.
rec? Like town rec? Where does that fall? Like a recreation that has their own, like they might have like
That'd be a
they're not.
facility and resource manager. That would be.
That's your that area.
Or Greg, it could lend itself to be someone like a league representative, like a commissioner of a league, for example.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a separate category that we've overlooked, and which I'm going to add to the list right now.
We actually have that on our system right now. It's a multi-level group. So it would be exactly that. It'd be the league, and then with groups underneath it. And I was just writing down, when you do that, when you have a league with other groups underneath it, you need to have that visibility on that front page. Here's the league, and here are the teams under it, so you can click to the other teams, to the lower teams.
Right.
So
Like AAU is the top, and then under the AAU you have different regions, and then you have different teams. It's like, that's the hierarchy you have. They're going to want
exactly the whole concept.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Leslie, the key thing to understand about what these profile or member types will provide to us is it will provide some demographic breakdown so that we can target messaging and communication to these people.
Right.
And it will also control the display of content on various pages.
Right.
And an example of that is if you have a trainer visit a baseball page, for example, they're going to want to see different things than a player would want to see. A player is going to want to see the training videos, perhaps. A trainer is going to want to see news, about new training techniques or, what have you. So a parent might want to see different kinds of material. A parent might not want the training material. So So that's what I mean about the display of content on a page, that it may be for the different profile or member types, the way a page is laid out. Maybe all the content is on the page, but you position it differently. Some is top, some is bottom.
Right.
So those are the two primary purposes for the definition of these profile types. There is a complexity to it in that if I am interested in basketball, I might be a player, a coach, and a trainer. And the complexity comes, well, how do we address it when someone is filling multiple roles within the sport? How do we define the content there? That's not something we're looking for at this point in time, but that's the purpose of these lists. So if there's anything else that you can think of, just let us know.
How to
So we can
visually
include
lay
that.
out in order, like of relevance to a parent portal, a team portal, a trainer portal. Is that what you're talking about, right? How to
Yeah, yeah. So when a parent
relevance?
goes to my team page, the stuff that's up top might be different than when an athlete goes to that page or when a coach goes to that page. You know, the way it's presented to that person is
Visually,
going to be based on,
Yeah.
visually.
like even I
And
know
not visual.
for the rowing stuff, like
Not-
I get the stuff they just like youth sports. I mean, sports you rather is like it's kind of like it's just like a communication tool. I've been texting and whatever and sharing, and you hear and actually what's great about it is that it's your little group, right, controlled, and everyone signs up for it. But what's bad about it is I hear everybody else's communication that's not relevant to me, or I get the pictures of the girls' team rowing when I'm on the boys' team, right? I mean, like, see, it's not content specific. It's not even that specific enough to the right team. They just group all the teams together, but you're going to have a specific portal for a specific team. So that's the beauty of this, is that I can opt out of things that I don't want to hear, right? That I'm hearing with the bigger, larger group, right?
Yeah, we can use Slack as a model for that. They're really good about that.
Yeah.
So,
Greg, one thing I wanted to ask you to think about related to these is if someone says, I'm interested in sport X, but I'm not a player, I'm not a pro, I'm not a coach, I'm not a parent, I'm not a recruiter, I'm not a facility manager, I'm not a commissioner or anything, like,
Community member.
like, can someone be interested in a sport and not choose anything, or do they become community member, or does that make them a fan or enthusiast?
I would say fan
Like,
enthusiast.
I would say, yeah, because you're missing I got your 7 things of your profile types. You're missing the guy that lives in Ohio and wants to follow his local regional Ohio high school team with some up and coming big star, and he wants to follow those games. He's not a parent, he's a grandparent, he has no kids in the school, he doesn't play, he's not a coach, he's just a community member. So therefore he's a fan, right? He's a fan following a team.
Yeah, fan of
So
the sport.
Yeah, so Greg, would community member be different than a fan or an enthusiast?
No, I don't think so. It's just a fan. It's someone who wishes to follow the team of your neighborhood
Okay.
high school. Let's say you live in Carolina, you want to follow UNC because you live there. You're a fan of, right?
So the terminology, what we call it, whether it's called fan or enthusiast or community, whatever, I think we can tweak that language later. But the fact is that we think that should be the default. Like if you're nothing else, that's what you get assigned, is you're considered a fan or enthusiast or community member or whatever.
Yeah, I think that should be,
And I would agree.
when you search for a different sport than you've already said you're interested in, you should be asked if you want to continue seeing updates on that sport. Also, we should have some place where the recent searches are saved for me as a member. So next time I go into the site and you hit that hourglass button or the spyglass button, it says these are your recent searches. So you don't have to put in again the Washington State Capitals or Washington Capitals. It's, it pops up so you can automatically, so it automatically populates the search bar.
Yeah, that's probably a future phase kind of thing.
Yeah, that's sort of a cool thing to do.
I would
Okay, so I think also we need the athletic trainer and the class trainer as roles, because we hopefully will be getting a lot of those on the site, and those are, I think if I'm a coach, I could also be a class trainer or an athletic trainer, or a player.
Is there a difference
Separate,
between the
you want
two?
coach and trainer together, or they're separate? You want them separate?
They're separate. Athletic trainer is licensed by the National Athletic Trainers Association. Those are the ones that are medically trained who stand on the sidelines waiting for somebody to break a leg.
Right.
As
So that's
opposed to
not,
a class trainer who's a yoga trainer, a yoga class, or a yoga studio person.
you know, there are all these great, all these new upcoming thing with COVID. It's like, you know, it's not like so original, but there are all these people trying to take the gym trainers and pull them out of the gym and give them their own schedule and kind of they'll build a community around that. These are like the not a medical trainer like for a sport, but they're like these little gym guys that do personal training, you know, at that Equinox, that kind of thing. Those are a lot of businesses coming. I see like 2 or 3 of them just in New York City alone coming to try to pull those people and schedule them, you know, remotely. You know.
You are in New York City, you're right.
So you have 9. I just went over 9. Player, pro, coach, parent, recruiter, team manager, group admin, that's combined. Faculty, resource manager, fan or community member, and then trainer. Is that what you have? That's 9.
Athletic trainer, class trainer, coach, athlete, fan.
I have commissioner or league admin is another.
Okay. That's like the AAU person. Okay. That's 10 then. Nice, easy. As a player, pro, coach, parent, recruiters, a team manager, like the mom scheduler, group admin, that's 1. And then the next one is faculty resource manager, fan or community member, trainer, and league admin. 10.
Yeah, I have 11. Hang on.
Nice.
There's athlete, player.
Wait, hold on.
There's
Athlete,
Player,
pro,
pro 2, 3 coach, 4 parent, 5 recruiters, 6 team manager / mom / scheduler, group admin / 7
Wait, go back to that one. Leslie, what was that one?
team manager, like a mom or a scheduler or team manager.
Okay, so I had that down as what?
Group admin.
Yeah, it's a group admin or yeah, right. It's a group admin or a team admin.
And then 7, you had faculty resource manager, 8 fan or community member, 9 trainer, 10 league admin.
Okay.
That seems to cover it. I mean, I can't think of anything else.
Did you have athletic and class trainer as separate?
I have them as separate. Because athletic trainer really is just managing their team room and then taking care of the rehab of the kids who get hurt. Class trainer is someone who's scheduling, professionally scheduling a yoga class or yoga studio, or TRX or whatever.
Oh, I didn't have that. You want that in there, class trainer, like a.
Yeah, you know why? Because that's a moneymaker for us. That we can charge the class trainer $5 a month to have their system, as opposed to like Mind Body does it right now. That will also give us that. In order for their people to sign up, they have to sign up to UB Sports in order to get to the class.
So that's like the Equinox woman's doing the body bar, like strength. That's their class.
Yeah.
It's like a personal trainer. It's like
Yeah.
a personal trainer.
Exactly.
So a gym trainer. Yeah. Yeah.
And the cool thing
And
about
just
that
for
is that they can charge.
clarity, Leslie, it's facility and resource manager, not faculty manager.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
I know the difference. Sorry.
I think that's it.
Okay. So the third thing that we were going to talk about, there was opt-outs, these profile types, and then there was the onboarding process. And Greg, we left it last week that I was going to kind of write something up. So I did write something up. I will post it on that Slack channel for you guys to review it. But here's basically what I've written down. So I'm just going to kind of review it so you guys can absorb it, but then I'll post it up on Slack for feedback.
Yeah, Kelly and I talked a lot about this a couple of days ago.
Okay. So an anonymous user will browse public pages on the website. To use the mobile apps, a user must log in or register there because there's no public or anonymous screens in the mobile apps. Second, the anonymous user will register by providing an email address and a password. And typically you'll put the password in twice so you don't typo it or something. The website registration will also capture some source analytics, if any, like did they come from this ad or did they come from this website or this referral or something. The user will be asked to check their email to verify their registration. That way you know that you have a valid email address for that person.
Right.
The user will not yet be allowed to access member pages until their email is verified. The system will send an email. Third, the system will send an email to the email address provided by the user at registration. The email will contain a link for the user to verify their email address. The user will click that link in the email and will be taken to a login page on the site.
Okay.
5, the user will log in and will be required to provide some mandatory data: first name, last name, date of birth, their country, and a zip code or postal code.
Why
There
the
will
date?
also be some
Why the date?
I'm sorry?
Why the date of birth?
age, if they're 13 or under. Okay.
You could just put a question: Are you over 18? People might not want to enter their date of birth. That may be weird about that. Maybe you can put like under or over 18. I don't know. Are you over 18? Like click, you know.
I'll
Actually,
defer
13,
to Greg to give
Leslie.
that thought.
Or 13, yeah, sorry.
The problem is if you ask them for their age, if I put in 12, which means that we have to follow the child protection laws,
Right.
they could turn 13 tomorrow or in 360 days.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, I've never been asked to put my date of birth for anything, and I would be hesitant to do that. Like, I don't
I
know.
just did today on 2 sites.
You did? I don't know. I'm just saying some people might not like want to do that, you know.
Yeah, if we're dealing with children, you're going to have a date of birth. You can't just rely on the age because, you know, if you think of a 17-year-old, I might turn 18 in 2 days or 18 in 360 days. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The age doesn't do a whole lot.
Right.
And the age you can always calculate from the date of birth. If somebody's unwilling to give a date of birth, you know, like if you're an adult, you put in a fake date of birth.
Right.
You know, if you're that concerned about it, it's really to drive the child protection laws and the things we need to do for minors. Okay, so anyway, there will also be some optional data that we will ask. The list of optional data has yet to be determined, but will include things like your favorite sport or activity and what your role is in that sport or activity. Okay, baseball and I'm a parent, basketball and I'm a player, whatever. Okay, next is if the member is 12 or under, the system will trigger the parental approval process, which will be defined later. If the member is aged 13 to 17, the system will offer the parental approval process.
I would say parental involvement instead of parental approval.
Okay, yeah. The reason for that, Leslie, is that the federal child online protection law says anybody under the age of 13 must have parental approval for anything that they do really on the internet. From 13 to 17, there are governing bodies that want to protect themselves by anybody who's a minor under 18 would need parental permission or approval or something like that. So that's why there's a distinction between those two sets of ages. The one question that I raised last week, Greg, and I'll mention it for your benefit, Leslie, is how do we deal with an emancipated minor? Someone who doesn't have parents and is considered an adult.
Haven't we taken that out of
and maybe we don't.
if we start 13
mean-
under? Or
Yeah, but
13?
you know, like some states, you know, the age for legal age for marriage or something is like 18, right? But if you're an emancipated minor at 16 and you can prove whatever that means, if you can prove you're an emancipated minor, you don't need parental permission to go get married and you're under
There's
18.
paperwork for that.
So I don't know how that applies to the Child Protection Act. Obviously, I think for at that point, if you're under 13, you're not going to be considered emancipated at 12 years old. So I don't think it applies there. But it's more for like someone who's 17 years old, is living on their own, and wants to participate in the tennis stuff. And the U.S. Tennis Association says, well, you got to be 18 or you have to have parental approval. So how do we address that? And maybe these are one-off cases. You know, anyway, it's a question to be thought of later, but I've noted it in this process. So after the user provides the mandatory data and they complete the parental approval, if applicable, the system will mark their account as verified. Member accounts which remain unverified for X number of days or weeks will be purged from the system. Member accounts that require parental.
There should be a second
What's
email
that?
that goes out. There should be a second email that goes out.
Well, yeah, maybe a second, maybe a third, whatever.
Right.
Okay, yes. But the fact is that after a certain period of time and a certain number of attempts to get them to verify, we'll purge them out of our system. Likewise, member accounts that require parental approval or parental involvement, which are not approved, will also be purged from the system after a certain period of time or a certain number of attempts to get that approval.
So there also has to be a system that where you fill in, as a kid, you're filling in the parent's email address. And if you're a parent signing on, you want your kids involved, you set them up as your children.
Yes, I have it. That's where when it triggers the parental approval process, we'll define that process separately. I did not include if someone marks their profile as I'm a parent, that we offer them to say, is your child a member? Those are separate functional pieces. That's not part of the onboarding process that I see, the registering yourself and stuff, okay?
Where is the person going to pick that box that says terms and conditions? I approve the terms and conditions.
We'll have to figure out where that comes into play.
Can I ask a question?
You know,
So
we'll have to,
when you got a kid over 13, you're giving you can legally get their email, or is it the parental permission that you can get the kids' email? Because they have their own emails, right? If it's 13 to 17, you're getting the parents' email, or are you getting the kids' email, or both?
No, if you're 13 to 17 and you go to join a group or team that has told UB Sports, we want parental permission for anyone under 18.
Then you get their email.
I don't know, but one of the governing bodies told Greg, yeah, we want anybody under 18 to need parental approval. So if you're 13 to 17, we're not going to trigger that process. We'll offer it. We'll say, do you want to have your parent involved? And chances are the kid's going to say, no, I don't. But if they go to join a tennis related group, because the tennis association said anybody under 18 needs parental, we'll then trigger that and say, the tennis association requires you to have parental approval. Let's go through this process. So that's how it'll work. Okay. So at that point, after the parental approval happens, after collecting the mandatory data, et cetera, the system will encourage the member to complete their profile. Here's all the other data you can tell us about yourself. What are your favorite sports? What are your favorite teams? How tall are you? How fast do you run? Whatever level of detail we want to take them through, but we'll promote them to fill out their profile more completely, a profile picture perhaps, et cetera, that kind of stuff. Then when the member logs out, or because some people don't log out, they just kind of shut their computer off or shut their browser down or whatever, that's known as what's called the end of a session, which automatically kind of logs you out of the site. In the same way that if you log into a site, after a certain period of time, you have to log in again, right? So that's what that is. So after the user logs out or their session ends, the system will send a welcome email to the member and the parent if applicable. The email will, among other things, identify that the member profile is only X% complete and will encourage them to complete their profile and join other groups or teams or sports or pages based on the profile data that they've already entered. So if somebody said they're a Lakers fan, we might include something that says, oh, join the basketball group, you know, whatever, something like that. When a member who is 13 or 17, this is something that you asked about and I just mentioned. When a member who is 13 to 17 does not yet have parental approval, joins a group or team or whatever, which requires parental approval, the system will trigger that parental approval process for that sport. And of course, that parental approval process would apply at that time to any sport that this person joined, not just
blocked if they
tennis,
don't get
because
that
tennis.
parental approval. Does that member get blocked without the parental approval? They can't access.
They would not be able to join the tennis group.
Yeah,
They'd
yeah.
still be able to do anything else, just
Okay.
not that tennis group. Okay.
So in the group, when the group
And
gets
then-
set up, the administrator has to be asked that question. Do you need a person under 18 to have parental involvement? Okay.
So that's a basic recap of what I've written up. There are plenty of details that go into it, like what is the parent approval process? The question you just asked, Greg, like, well, when we onboard a new sport, for example, because a governing body has signed on or something, you know, how do we onboard a governing body? By asking that question, right? I mean, somebody with authority has to answer. So there's a separate onboard process for a sport, okay? That kind of thing.
I would say governing body, not a sport. The sport is very broad. I would just say the governing body or organization.
Hey guys, I have a call at 1. I have to run. But I'll go on Slack today and I'll think of any other opt-in, opt-out. I'll look at that list and I'll get back by the end of the day. And then, you know, Greg, I didn't mention to you, but you know, there's another, I don't know if you're interested or not, but there's another CAVA. I keep getting those CAVA deadlines. Columbia, the incubator, right. They have a deadline next week. Starts in January. I don't know if you're interested or you want to, you know, they're happy with any, you know, any kind of product you can throw your hat in there.
Could you email me a link to that or text me a link to that?
Yeah, I think the deadline is like next week and it starts in January. It's just like, and then you do like, I listened into their demo day a couple weeks ago, you know, and then you're just getting in front of people who are, you know, venture people, you know, fellow alumni interested in that kind of, you know, any kind of new business or new venture, but I'll forward you that.
Yeah, dude, get back to me and I'll take care of that. I'll get on there.
I'll do that on Slack today. All right.
Great. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks guys. Bye.
Thank you, Leslie.
Nice chat. Talk to you later. Bye.
She got the, okay, you went away too? Okay.